Hi, Olivia here, and today we're doing a story time. Basically, today's video is going to be about my connection to the Chucky doll. So I'm gonna start out with when it began, and then I'm gonna sort of tell you guys a bit of what happened a little later. Okay? So please follow the story. You know when you watch a movie and a horror movie specifically, and you see a child grow attached to a very ugly or very creepy toy, that's me. I got attached to Chucky specifically growing up. And I'm going to tell you guys how it went down. When I was a child, I lived in the USA for a big portion of my childhood, like 8 years. And we used to live in Philadelphia specifically. We would see everyone go out to go trick or treating as a child, and we couldn't be a part of that, which was so upsetting to me because I really, really wanted to be a part of it. Because I would see people becoming their favorite hero. I would see people dressed. I saw a kid dressed as someone showering with literally a fake shower and everything. I saw a 3-year-old ladybug. It was something that I wanted to be a part of personally, but unfortunately, during my childhood, I was not allowed to because my mother was very religious. So, me and my brother, due to the religion in our family, we couldn't go trick or treating. So, we didn't go through that experience. However, my mom worked in multiple houses as a house cleaner, and one of her employers in specific, I believe her name was either Susie or Susan, or maybe it was Susan and Susie was her nickname. But she took pity on our young little souls, and specifically, she did not. I don't think she knew at first that I had a little brother, but she had personally met me, so her connection to me was a little bit bigger. So she felt bad that I didn't celebrate. Not celebrate. I didn't go trick or treating, right? So in order to like make me feel a little bit better or make me and my brother feel a bit better, she sent us a brown big bag full of candy. And alongside with that, she sent a present. It was all wrapped up, very pretty and stuff. And my mom, she didn't know what was in that present box. She just knew that most likely it was a doll or a toy or something, just to make me happy. But it was a reasonably big bag and a reasonably big present. So my mom didn't open it. She just gave it to me. And that was her first mistake. She should have opened that bag. She should have opened it. Because along with a bag of candies, little baby me, little bite sized me, got a life size Chucky doll. And not the cute version. Because there's like the version without the scars, the one before he goes through everything in the movie. No, it was the ugly version. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that nowadays it's actually a limited edition. But it had the scars. It had the worn out clothes. It was big. Like I think it was meant to be the exact same size as the doll in the movie. And compared to my midget size, it was a very big doll. And my mom at first was creeped out, likely so and rightfully so, right? Because imagine a very religious woman gets a killer doll as a present for her little girl. It's weird. But since it was Halloween, it kind of made sense. And my mom wasn't afraid that I would get attached to said doll because I had a very strange habit. Every toy I would get, because my mom didn't really need to buy me many toys because either my grandmother bought me toys or someone she worked for would give me presents occasionally. So my mom never really needed to buy a lot of toys. So I genuinely already had a lot. So what I would do was, and my mom found this out later, what I would do was I would get rid of my dolls by selling them for $1 each. I think the most expensive I've ever sold my dolls as a kid at school was like $2. I was like, yo, anyone want to buy this bobblehead for $2? And I would sell them. I'd sell them because I would weigh it out. I'd be like, okay, do I like this Barbie doll more or do I like the $1 bill more? Tough choice. I'm going with the money. You know what I mean? I was a very money addicted child. I liked money. I liked coins in specific. So she thought that since I wasn't attached to my very pretty toys, my little bobbleheads, puppies, and stuff, since I wasn't attached to them, there was no way little me would get attached to such an ugly doll. She believed that he would most likely disappear just like my other toys that were randomly disappearing. But unfortunately for her, that was not the case. On the contrary to every single other toy I've ever had in my life, I grew attached to this doll. And when I say attached, I say by the limb to the point where I would call it my baby, you know, which um, was a bit. I agree that nowadays, looking back, I'd be creeped out. But at the time, I don't know what went through my head. I loved that doll. I genuinely loved it. And that was the first red flag for my mom because in our house, we had already had problems with a haunted doll. And, my mom had already had experience having to get rid of a doll because of its supernatural tendencies. However, this doll was just ugly. There was nothing supernatural about it. It was just an ugly doll from a movie, okay? But anyways, my mom was already freaked out because of how attached and how strange I was acting towards this doll. I was talking to it. I was combing his little tufts of hair, the very few he still had on his head. I was putting him to sleep. I was changing his clothes. I was doing everything that a child would do to a baby doll, basically. And so that was creeping her out because I had never grown attached to any toy. And what drove her to the edge, what made her give up on letting me keep this doll, was, I think, two factors combined, but the second one was the defining factor. First of all, my brother, despite being spooked and scared, his desire to troll me was bigger than any fear he had. You gotta give the boy credit. My brother was younger than me, so I thought at the time that since this kid is younger than me and I don't lie, he definitely ain't lying. He's gonna be straightforward and honest with me about everything. So I believed every single thing my brother told me, which was a huge mistake on my part because he had hella fun with my dumb ass. He told me that Chucky had a superpower. And I remind you guys, I did not watch the movie. I only knew that this was a killer doll. I didn't know anything else aside from that. And my brother was like, well, Chucky, I don't know if you know this, but he has superpowers. He can make dolls come to life. If he touches them, they come to life. So be careful. And my brain thought, whoa, I'm gonna take the few dolls I still have that haven't mysteriously disappeared, and I'm gonna put them beside my bed because I would sleep with Chucky. I would be like this with him. So I would put them beside my bed with the intent that my Chucky doll would wake up in the middle of the night because I thought he just didn't move because I was still looking at him. I thought, no, if I go to sleep, he's gonna move. So I thought I'm gonna put him to sleep next to me, like I always do, and I'm gonna put the dolls next to him so that when he wakes up, he touches them, and I'm gonna gain a whole tea party of friends. You gotta love a child's innocence. Like, I'll hand you that. But what happened was he obviously did not wake up, but my mom thought it was very creepy because we slept in the same room, and here was her little girl holding a very ugly doll, and doing this little weird ritual. So that was like red flag number two at the time. But what really broke her was one time me and my brother were in the hallway, right in front of the bedroom, and my mom had a habit of eavesdropping on our conversations because she wanted to know what we were talking about when she wasn't there, which I didn't get. And she was hiding at the time. My brother couldn't take it anymore because he was terrified. He told me, he was like, Olivia? I was like, yeah. And he said, you do realize it's a killer doll, right? Aren't you scared? And I was like, scared? Why would I be scared? And he said, well, it's a killer doll. And I was like, well, has he ever killed any children? And my brother said, no. And I was like, well, silly. Then you have to be afraid as mom, not us. She's the one who's got to be afraid. I am so sorry, mother. I don't know what came over me. I don't know why I said that, but I feel bad for the possible terror I may have caused her when she heard that. Because, it's creepy to hear your kid saying, oh, she better watch her back because I'm not scared, but he probably gonna kill her. And that was like the nail in the coffin. She was like, oh, hell no, demon ain't staying here. But I will say this. My doll, my Chucky doll, he never actually moved. He didn't do anything. He was just a doll, okay? He didn't do anything. We have had actual haunted dolls, okay? So I defend him on that. I defend my baby on that. He did not move at all, despite my wishes. So my mom waited for me to go to school. And normally she would go to work before I went to school. So she would not be at home before I went to school. Like she would leave and she would come back after I was already at home. So I was never afraid that she would sort of get rid of my doll while I was at school because she was never at home. So I was like, okay. And then I went to school. My mom took advantage of the fact I went to school and she got rid of my Chucky. When I got back from school, I looked everywhere for my baby and I could not find him. And so I asked my mom, I was like, Mom, did you see my Chucky? And my mom was like, of course, she was like, she said this in Portuguese, she doesn't speak English. She was like, I got rid of that demon. And I was like, Mom. And she's like, I threw that son of a gun away. Of course, she didn't curse because my mom at the time didn't curse. And I was like, and then I went to the trash can because I thought she had thrown him away in our trash can. But later she told me that she didn't. She did not throw him away in our trash can. Instead, because she knew the creature she had as a child, she took this doll and she put him inside her car and drove like a good distance to a random house and threw him in this random person's trash can. So if you are living in the USA, Philadelphia, or New Jersey, and you happen to have found a Chucky doll inside your trash can, it may have been my mother. But I digress. Anyways, she did that because she knew that I was going to go into the trash can and dig him out. So she went the extra mile, okay? After this incident, my relationship with Chucky didn't end. Oh no. Because after this, I spent a few years upset with my mother because of this, but I wasn't like outright confronting her or arguing with her or anything, but I was very sad. And my brother, who, remember, he liked to tell some fibs to me because he liked like playing with my face. I don't know. He liked trolling me, you know. So he started making up even more stories about Chucky. And I only watched the movie in like my preteen years when I was like 12 to 14 because I used to think that I couldn't watch horror movies because I would be too afraid. Unbeknownst to me, I actually do like horror movies. I didn't know at the time. So I stood far away from horror movies when I was a kid because I was afraid that I would be afraid. Unbeknownst to me, I'm not afraid, so whatever. Anyways, my brother told me a bunch of lies regarding Chucky after that. And one of the lies he told me, mind you, this was a 7-year-old little kid lying to a 9-year-old. I'm just saying. He told me that Chucky was not a actual doll. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, well, I'm going to tell you a secret. Did you know that Chucky is actually a midget? And I was like, no way. Chucky was a midget? And he's like, yeah, he was a midget. And do you know why he had all those scars back when he was here at home with us? And I'm like, why? And he said, well, he had all the scars because he's allergic to the sun. And I was like, oh my gosh, my baby. It's no wonder mom wouldn't let me take him out. And my brother was like, yeah, and you want to know why he never killed any kids? And I'm like, shh, tell me, come on, tell me. And he said, it's because the kids never bullied him. The adults were the bullies. And since the kids loved him for who he was, without judging his outer appearance, he never hurt any kids because they were the only friends he had. And looking back, I really have to give my brother credit for this. The kid had an imagination when he was young, okay? He was creative with his lies, and he told them with confidence. So I was like, no way, this is a lie. This is the verbatim truth. So I spent a lot of time sad because I thought that my baby was actually a midget, was allergic to the sun, and I thought that he was suffering from bullying, you know? So I was very upset. And after that, my brother still told me a few more lies, but I think the one that stuck with me in my brain for some reason was after that, he told me two lies regarding Chucky after that again. One of the lies was that Chucky had now relocated, that after mom had gotten rid of him, he had found a home, and it was at the house of someone really famous. And by the way, I suspect that he told me this lie because at the time he liked this actor and maybe he wanted me to like him as well. I don't know why he said this or said this lie, but I believed him. He told me that freaking Will Smith was living with Chucky, and that the Chucky that lived at my house was at Will Smith's mansion, and that Will Smith had a secret room full of copies of my Chucky, and he had my original Chucky as well. My brother claimed that Will Smith and Chucky were the best of friends. He claimed that they were united, you know, they were bros. And after that was when I became a Will Smith fan. Because after I found out that my boy was at Will Smith's house, I thought, now I'm gonna watch everything this actor does because he's taking care of my son. You gotta love a kid's innocence. Yo, seriously, I'm like, mm-mm. And to make matters worse, like a few months after that, my brother told me that Chucky had left because he had had some sort of beef with Will Smith and that they had sort of broken up the friendship. And now Chucky was living elsewhere. And I was like, well, where is he now? And my brother said that my Chucky was now living in the mirror dimension. And I was like, what? And he was like, oh, do you know Bloody Mary? The story I told you before. And I'm going to get into that later. And he was in another video, by the way. And he said, well, do you know how Bloody Mary appears in the mirror of black bathrooms? I was like, yeah. And he said, well, there's actually a dimension inside the mirror. And inside that dimension, there's a huge mansion where Bloody Mary lives with her boyfriend, the Candyman. And they took in Chucky. And now Chucky's living with Bloody Mary and the Candyman. And I was like, no way. He was like, way. And oh my gosh, I feel like I was a very stupid child. But anyways, later on, he told me that Chucky apparently had a beef with the Candyman and Bloody Mary, and they sort of kicked him out of the dimension, and he was at some other kid's house now. And that's where he ended the tale, the story of Chucky. But yeah, that was my relationship to the horror doll Chucky. And I would like to ask you guys, what would you do if your kid became incredibly infatuated with a killer doll? And I have other stories for other story times involving dolls. Like I said, I know what I did after when my sister grew attached to a doll. But what would you guys do? What would you do if your child became infatuated with a killer doll? What would your reaction be? And I guess that's it. Anyways, bye.